Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Around the Table GTA. I'm back in Scarborough and I have another guest. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, my name is Alex. Not a Scarborough native, but I've been here for about 5 months, and it's pretty good so far.
Yeah, so we are going around the GTA. Hopefully, our next episode might be in another area, but so far we have some pretty good residences. So, Alex, how did we meet?
We met at a party, and I was talking about stuff I liked, and then Tails came and just said everything I said was nonsense, and we just argued until we became friends.
Yeah, that's like 50% of that's like 50% of my relationships with people. But what were we talking about again? Because I don't remember.
I think we were talking about Stranger Things, and I was on team Beth deserved to not only not deserve to die, but she kind of got herself in that position by trying to prevent her friend from getting laid. And Tails was very much of the opinion that she was being a good friend. So yeah, and then it went from there.
Yeah, so a lot of like I know a lot of people, and all of our stories are completely different. But it has been a while. I think I haven't seen you since before the pandemic. So how has the last several years of your life been?
Oh, it's a lot like the rest of life, a lot of ups and downs. Uh, yeah, I think last time we talked was like 2018, and in 2019 I bought a condo,
Hmm.
and now I don't have a condo. So life just comes, just gotta ride the wave. Yeah.
That's pretty extreme. Do you want to talk about that, or are we gonna move on to another topic?
uh, yeah, I can touch on it a little bit. So I lived quite literally in my mom's basement until I was about 28, and then I saved up enough money to get a condo. And 2019, I was like, this is the time to do it. So went ahead, got a condo. The maintenance fees plus the mortgage was like over $3,000 a month. But I had a pretty good job at the time, working at a casino, and I was like, I can afford this, and maybe I'll even get a roommate. And then a few months after that, I think I was in my condo for about 4 months, and then on March 17th, 2020, my work told me that we're all getting laid off. So, very exciting when you owe over 3 grand every month and you have no job. And I've always kind of been a survivor, kind of just landing on my feet, figuring things out as things come. And yeah, we can touch more on that when I talk about finances and my unofficial financial advice for people trying to survive in this city where everything costs way too much.
Yeah, the market is pretty crazy, and remember, guys, anytime you're doing anything, there's big risks, but there's also potentially a big reward. Um, we are going to be talking about dating for a bit. A lot has changed in Alex's life. Like he said, it's been 6 years. Can't believe it's been 6 years. And even between that time, for me, I don't know if you've seen me on Facebook, if you have me on Facebook, I like to connect with people, especially after what happened with the pandemic. People need to meet each other in real life, right? Like our last guest said, they called it meat space,
Mhm.
right? So it's a different, I think it's a different feeling when you're with someone in person. Obviously, we're both online people. We play a bunch of video games or played a bunch of video games. Um, but there is a difference when you meet people in real life and make real connections. So it's hard to make time for people, but when you make time for people, the experience is different. But with that being said, we're gonna go into some dating. So how's your dating life been? I know when I talked to you, I was like, wait, what? And yeah, and then I was Facebook creeping, and I was just like, okay, damn.
Yeah, my advice for anyone in any situation is you should always keep your eye open for opportunities. Because a lot of time, if you have like a certain plan, you kind of have blinders on. You're not really looking out for what other potential is out there. And this applies for dating. It applies for pretty much any area of your life. Um, so yeah, dating. I dated quite a few people. Kind of figuring out what I'm looking for, what I'm not looking for, that sort of thing. Uh, the pandemic was great in terms of everyone now had a ton of free time. So like it's very easy to coordinate meeting up, even though in the beginning like a lot of stuff was closed. When I went on a date with my now wife, we just went ahead and we went. And I picked her up and we went to go get a coffee at Tim Hortons, and she was just blown away that I paid for her coffee, which was like less than $3. and it's been great ever since. I mean, we've had our like ups and downs, but we work really well together. Um, yeah, so like during the pandemic, I downloaded Tinder. I got banned from Tinder within a month,
Oh,
and they
damn.
won't tell me why, and I don't know what I did wrong. But then I downloaded. A friend told me about Bumble, which is great because the girls make the first move, which means no one is going to message you. And then I went ahead and I switched to Hinge, and that's where I met my wife. And yeah, it was pretty great. She's great. She's from Uganda, and she came to Canada in 2019, so right before the pandemic hit. So she had a different idea of what being in Canada was going to be like, because she didn't really quite get to experience it the way that most people before her had experienced it. She saw snow for the first time that she came here. She understood that cold air hurts, which is a new experience for I'm sure a lot of people that might come from areas where it doesn't become freezing. And yeah, dating is fun. Because before that, a lot of people that I matched with, there's always like kind of arbitrary rules about dating, about how uh, don't kiss until like the third date, or like don't talk about long term goals until like the fifth date, or like anything like that. But I'm kind of autistic. My wife is very forward. I don't have any like diagnosis for her or anything like that. But basically, on the first date, she sat down. We talked for about 15, 20 minutes about like what sort of media we like, or what type of music we're into, like just try to see like if we can touch base on those type of cultural things. But right after that, she was very forward. She let me know that she's interested in having like 6 kids. She wants to get married. She had a timeline for everything. She wanted to know if I was agreed with that timeline. I kind of explained to her that having 6 kids in Canada is difficult for a number of reasons. Not impossible, but it's tricky. For one, what are we going to drive? Because like I might need to get like one of those airport shuttles with like 6 seats in it. So we had a bit of back and we had a bit of a back and forth, and then we settled that we're going to have 4 kids, which is up from my 3 and down from her 6. And right now, in a month, she's going to have her second child. So we're going to see if she's still okay with 4. But yeah, parenthood's been great. Dating is great. I'd say the number one advice I have for dating is definitely make sure you and the other person are interested, like have the same goals and looking for the same thing. Like if you're looking for a casual relationship and the other person's looking for like a long-term relationship or vice versa, you're just, it's not even so much wasting time, but you're wasting like emotional energy by dating people that don't want what you want. So definitely try and like if you are going to date people, make sure you guys are on the same page. It'll save you a lot of emotional problems down the line, and time, money, like everything. If you only got one life, you don't want to spend like 2-3 years just making the same mistakes over and over.
I think that's some great advice. I got a question though. So, what date was it when she told you all of those things? Where it was like, I want this many kids, I want to get married, blah blah blah. Was that like the second date, or was that like
that was the first date? I think she was halfway through her coffee.
Oh damn!
And she's just like, because she since coming to Canada, she had been living in a hotel. And the only thing she really did with her spare time was she played PUBG on her phone, and she went on dates because everything was closed. So it's not like she could explore the city a lot. So she would just go on dates with guys. And she was kind of getting to the point where she was tired of wasting, I wouldn't say wasting her time, but it's kind of like fishing.
Yeah.
And you're just always looking for like the right fish, and it's just not coming. And after a while, you're like, I don't want to do this for like another 6 months or another year. You're like, can I have something? Can I have a relationship I can start investing into and like start building something? And so she's just like, look, this is the first date, but I don't want to go on like a second or third date and then find out later down the line that that's just a waste of time for both of us.
Damn.
So she's very forward. She's probably the most focused person I've ever met in my life. Very extremely driven, and it just feels like she just has tons of firepower all the time, like mentally, to work towards whatever she wants.
That's great. Like I don't hear that often, and I think even in the dating culture to an extent, especially coming from the female side, women aren't usually as forward, at least here in the West, right? Like I do have an African background as well, and my view on women here sometimes is a little bit I don't want to say extreme. Maybe I'll save it for another podcast episode when I start doing the under the table. That's what I'm going to do for more explicit content or things that may or may not get me canceled. But there's a difference when you have a partner or you have someone where they can be decisive, right? Like we were talking about my job. I don't talk about my job all the time, right? But I do talk about it on the podcast at times where I'm in a position where I'm always making decisions, right? And the majority of my life, I've always made decisions. So even having a partner similar to yours is a great ease for me because I could stop being the person, oh, do this, do this, do this. Someone else could take the reins and then I could take some time to relax. And clearly she did like you enough to let you know on the first date because that's like that is definitely not Canadian culture at all, but she just gave you the business right away. And I think some people, especially now, like if you think dating was weird when were you guys dating? You said 2019, 2020?
2020 we started dating.
2020.
Yeah.
Between 2020 and now, it's like a graveyard, bro. And this is coming from someone who I casually date now just because it's like she said, it's emotionally draining.
Yep.
It's emotionally draining. And then, some people are talking to 3, 4, 5 people at the same time, right? I guess she was nice enough to be like, okay, yeah, this is not going to work. I'm going to talk to someone else. So.
And again, the people that are dating like 4 or 5 people at the same time, it's because they realize, time is marching forward.
Mm-hmm.
If I date one person at a time, I could date 6 people in 1 year, and that whole year is gone. But if I date 6 people at the same time, I can maybe date like 50 people that year, and one of them is the right person.
Yeah.
So, like the way that, but then at the same time, you can't get that emotionally invested in one person if you're dating 4 other people at the same time that you also might be interested in. Like, it's difficult all around. And that's why, yeah, my only advice, just be as straightforward as possible. And some people can be turned off by that. Like on the first date, they're like, why are you mentioning whether or not you want to have kids? Why are you mentioning whether or not you want to, buy or rent or like or what your career aspirations are? Like this should be a lighthearted first date where we just talk about like music or stuff. But honestly, like at least in my experience, being straightforward will save. It's a ton of positives. And in the short term, you might look at it because you're like, yeah, I've gone on 4 dates, and on those first 4 dates, all of them said they didn't want a second date because I was so forward and like bringing up all this stuff. But I mean, is it better that they tell you that on the first date that they don't want to go forward, or better they tell you on like the 5th date that they don't want to go forward? You just really gotta look at it that way. And some people might say like, oh, that seems very like unnatural and not normal. But again, I feel like for the GTA, yeah, you're gonna meet a lot of people that are dating multiple people. You're gonna meet a lot of people that are gonna try and waste your time. Not waste your time, but in the end, objectively, it will not be a good use of your time. I would say.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and I think we were talking about culture a bit, and it's the culture here where you were talking about the story about your wife talking about the Canadian niceness, right? And are we really nice? And it's being direct and knowing what you want and what you want to pursue further. Because a lot of people talk about, oh, I want to be in a relationship and we'll build together. But I think from what you said too, if someone knows from the jump that this is what you want, it'll push things in a better way, right? Because look, you're married, right? It's been 4 years, barely 4 years. It's just 2024, second episode of 2024. You're married, you're getting your second kid, and everything is changing a lot. So when it comes to culture, when it comes to marriage, what do you have to say, or how do you feel about that stuff?
So I can say about marriage. So my brother is engaged. He's been engaged for pre-pandemic. So he met his fiance before I met my wife. And he's older than me about 4 or 5 years, I forget, which is bad. But I think once you become like 25, age is just like it just falls by the wayside. Like sometimes people ask me how old I am, and I just have to like sit there. I'm like, how old am I? And I'm like, oh yeah, 32. Like it's getting up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just had his daughter, his first child, about 6-7 months ago, and his relationship with his fiance is very different than mine with my wife. My brother takes after a lot like my dad, and I have a different approach to family than my dad. So my brother feels like women are supposed to kind of do the majority of the work with raising a child, I don't know if my brother changes diapers. I'm not entirely sure what his responsibilities are, but it feels like he definitely feels like, a mom's job is to raise children, and a father's job is to provide financially, I should say. I guess you could. So my wife and I do really well because we're fairly, we try to make it as equal as possible. And this may not work in all relationships because sometimes, you'll meet women that if they're a mom, they feel like if they have less responsibility, then they're less involved in their child's life. And they kind of have this feeling that maybe they're not being a mom in the right way. But at least for me, with my wife and I, we share financial responsibility quite a bit. We share like rearing our daughter. Right now, my wife is working. I used to work in a hospital up until November, but I got in a car accident, and because of that, I haven't been able to return to work. So now I've kind of become a stay-at-home dad for my daughter, and we get along great. Like I change diapers, I bathe her sometimes my wife does. We try and make it as equal as possible. I make dinner sometimes my wife makes dinner, and we just find that this way we never get a chance to build resentment towards each other because we're always helping each other, and we're not like telling the other person what they should do or that they're doing anything wrong. So it works out pretty well. And yeah, I'd say if anyone's becoming like a new parent, like my brother has definitely talked to me about it a few times, where he's just like the first 6 months of having a child, at least for being a dad, it can be a little difficult emotionally because here's someone that you want to bond with and you want to make sure that they know that you're their father and their child, and you want to have that connection. But in my experience and my brother's experience, the first 6 months, your child doesn't really care about you. Your child doesn't even really know who you are. Like they know you're around, so they won't freak out if you're in the room with them. But like if they're hungry, it's usually the mom that they're gonna look to for food. If they want to be like cuddled or anything, it's the mom they want to look for because like they've heard their mom's heartbeat for the first, the whole gestation period. And it really isn't until like after that 6 month window that your child kind of like looks at you and then like, hey, I don't know if I say parent, but you are your child's best friend. Because they haven't really had a chance to like mingle with anyone else, but they know they can come to you if they start crying, you're the person that comes to them. If they're hungry, you're the person that feeds them. If whatever they need, they know they can turn to you. And that really, as a father, doesn't start developing until about 6 months into the relationship. So the first 6 months is difficult because now you have this child that you're going to sleep maybe like 2 hours consecutively every night. So you're just going to become permanently sleep deprived. And that's going to be a part of your personality. And I'd say it's very important that you practice patience and understanding as much as possible because it's something a lot of people aren't used to, and it can be frustrating. Sometimes you do feel like you want to lash out because here you are, you want to be healthy, and someone is stopping you from being healthy, and you're feeling the effect of that. And on that note, I would just say if there's people out there that you're like, oh, I never want to have kids, I don't know if it's a hot take, but I'd say, yeah, that's fine. If you don't want to have kids, I'd say the worst thing you can do is someone says that they don't want to have kids and you try and convince them they should have kids. Because normally if someone says they're not ready to have kids, they know what they're talking about. If someone says, I do not do well when I'm sleep deprived, I'm not good at regulating my emotions, I'm not in a good financial place, and you try and say, hey, you know what you would like? How would you like to be sleep deprived and have less money and like have extra responsibility and all this stuff when they've already communicated that they would not handle that well? And we're not talking about just like a cat or a dog where if it doesn't work out, sure, you can rehome them. Like this is a human being. This is a person that their whole life is gonna know like my parent didn't want to have me, and it was apparent from the way I was raised. And of course, there's some people that do change, like because of circumstance they do have kids, and then like there's something switches in them, and they're like they just rise up to the occasion. But it's definitely not something that should be expected.
Wow, that's a lot, and I'm happy to hear about that because like I've been talking with more parents, I guess, in my podcast. A lot of single people, but our first guest was a parent. It's like almost every other guest is a parent, a new parent. So it's great to hear that, especially in this age where everybody's saying they're in like constant situationships, or you'll see a story where it's one guy and 5 girls. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we were all sleeping with the same guy, and there's all of these narratives, especially online, if you're in certain places where it kind of persuades you not to be in a relationship or not to have kids. And I think some of the people that I know, I had one friend who did not want kids at all, right? For me, that's a deal breaker. I want kids, right? But with her, when she met her husband, it was how he was that changed her mind. And she's like, I want kids with him, right? So I think it also depends on your partner and how you do things together that changes your perspective. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We all have our lives, and unless you have some crazy cultural pressure, like you're the only son and you must do the air. Like my one friend, he got married and like his dad was making that joke, right? And he has 4 kids, right? But he wanted to have kids eventually, but he had like 3 under 3. Have you heard that term before? 3 under 3?
I'm not.
So 3 under 3 is when you have 3 kids under 3, which is it's a lot of work. Someone has to definitely stay home. But with that being said, how has fatherhood changed you?
So I've always wanted to be a dad since I was like 10. As a kid, I was always told I was like mature for my age, which I'm pretty sure is just a precursor for like anyone that later in life is going to be diagnosed with like depression or autism or something. Because like kids shouldn't really be thinking that far ahead. But like when I was 10, I was like, what do I want as an adult? When I was in high school, I was like, okay, what am I going to do in 5 years? What am I going to do in 10 years? And a lot of professionals will or experts will tell you that most people under the age of 18 can't plan a year or two ahead. But I was always just looking in the future because I'm like, I know it's going to come one day, and I don't want to be there one day and just not know what the hell I'm doing and just be lost.
I love to hear that.
So I wanted to be a dad since I was like 10, and then just trying to find the right person. And that right person has changed over time. At first, I was like, I just want to be with someone who's really fun. I want to be with someone like every day is just an adventure, and we're just exploring and all that. And I've dated some people like that. And the problem is the more fun you try and find a person, not always, but from my experience, most of the fun people I've dated do not enjoy planning. They do not enjoy, if you tell them like, hey, I know you just got your paycheck. Let's try and save a good portion of that for something 5-10 years down the road. Like if we want to go and buy a house together, we have to start saving our money, and we're not going to see any positivity of that for another 5 or 10 years. A lot of people are like, I don't want to do that. I have the money now. Let's spend it now. And that's why I say when with dating, if you can find what you're looking for, what the other person and the other person what they're looking for, and you guys match, it's good to get that sorted as soon as possible. But being a dad, it's like I told my brother when his fiance was pregnant, and I told him like, everyone's going to tell you this. Get as much sleep as you can. And it's a bit of a joke. You don't need to. Because it's not like if you get extra sleep before the baby, now suddenly after you're going to be less sleep deprived. Like, it has no effect. It's just kind of like a lame joke that people say. But I did tell my brother that once you have a child, you will never work harder in your life, but you'll also never be as motivated in your life. So if you can just think to a time in your life when you're like super motivated and, you had something like a huge task in front of you. Like maybe there was one time in school you had like a 12-page paper you had to write, and there was this one time that you got this assignment. You're like, I can nail this out in a single night. Just picture that, but like long term. And my brother also told me after he had his daughter and she's about 3 months old, I asked him like, so how is being a father like? Just to get his perspective on things. And he's like, well, my fiance does most of the work, but I do work here and there too, and how he described fatherhood is having a child, it isn't hard, it's just work. And that's something I think about every week or so, every now and then. Because, you could also compare it to maybe, I'm not trying to put anyone down that works in the fast food service industry, but like if you work at McDonald's, working at McDonald's is a lot of work. It's not hard, but you are on your feet all the time. You are always doing things. You are always having to be engaged. You are always doing something. But the learning curve, it's not like you're going to have, the first week of every job is usually a steep learning curve. You're still trying to figure out how everything works. Usually after the first week very little new things you're learning. You're now into a rhythm. And the same thing can be said about parenthood, where at first it's a lot. You have to learn, how to hold a baby, how to feed a baby, how to change a baby, how to wash a baby, all these different things. If I'm taking her outside, is she properly dressed? If we go outside, do I have snacks? Do I have, a diaper? Do I have wipes? Am I anticipating things that might come up? But then once you've figured out what you should be doing, it's just routine. You're going to be doing work. It's you know if you know how to clean a shower, which you should be doing. A lot of people think showers clean themselves, but they don't. If you know how to clean a shower, it's work, but it's not like difficult. It's not like you're going to stop halfway through cleaning a shower and then look up a YouTube tutorial on how to clean a shower because you have no idea what you're doing. Like, you can pretty much figure it out. And the same thing about being a parent is there's not too much to learn. You just steep learning curve for the first week or so, and then you get into a rhythm and just work.
Okay, so I got one question for you. What's one thing you want your child to know for the future?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I gotta hit you with a deep one because, you're a new father and you're always thinking ahead, right? So let's add something there. We could also come back to it if you want.
Well, the one thing I want my daughter to know is something my wife actually taught me, and it's learning how to advocate for yourself. You can get so much accomplished. You'd be blown away by the untapped potential within yourself if you know how to advocate for yourself. My wife is just insanely good at getting what she wants. And sometimes she tells me, she's like, the reason we're married is because, like, I didn't let you break up with me. Like, I knew that this was going to work if you just put aside, like, your petty insecurities and stuff and just believed that this was going to work like I did. And, yeah, if my daughter can advocate for herself the way my wife does, she's going to do just fine in life. My wife came from Uganda. She graduated from one of the top universities. She got here. It's really not easy to immigrate to Canada. I mean, before I met my wife, I knew almost nothing about immigration. I thought getting a visa was like applying for a passport. Like, you just say, this is who I am, this is my identity, I'll pay the fee, I'll fill out a form, and I go in. No, it's so much trickier than that. Very few people get approved. Once you get approved, you have to show money. You have to show that once you get into this country, you're not just going to vanish, that you can actually afford to live in that country. You have to have a plan to prove that if you want to get a job, you can work. There's so many different levels. And, my wife didn't really have anyone helping her. There was no one helping her fill out forms. There was no one guiding her through the immigration process. She was just like, my goal is to be in Canada, I'm coming. And she did everything she needed to do, and then she got here. And then I was just lucky enough to download Hinge, and then our paths just kind of meet, at that one point. Because I'll be honest, dating, when I met her, I was very close to giving up. I was like, maybe I just need to get out of Toronto. Like, this whole place is just, all the people I was meeting, like, everyone treats you as an option. Everyone just kind of treats you like, you're one of 5 or 6 people I'm dating, and I'm just pitting you against those other people. I'm not really so many people, especially when they're dating multiple people, they're judging you based on how fun those dates are. Yeah. So it's how entertaining you are as a person. And when you're trying to seek a deeper connection with someone than just being entertainment, and you're put in these positions where you're mostly being judged on how entertaining you are, very difficult to date. But I stuck out just a bit longer, and I matched up with her. And her directness was just very refreshing, because I don't know if it's like a Western girl thing. I haven't dated a lot of African girls, so I don't know how much it's culturally or personality. But I will say, dating in Toronto, so many people are just looking for fun. Like, internally I refer to them as like hedonists, but I'm sure there's like a better term for them. But they're very much like, I just want to go work, get my paycheck, go out on the weekend, party. My job is stressful, so when I'm not at work, I want to de-stress. And dating is de-stressing with someone else. When really, at least in my view, if you're dating someone for a romantic reason, it should be, I am looking for someone that I want as a life partner, someone that I want to build a life with in the future. instead of just drifting around, and dancing, and whatever.
You know what? I'm glad someone else is saying it. So all the ladies, the 12% of ladies that listen to Around the Table GTA, not all guys are just looking for sex, okay? And I have a witness right here, and he's married. So, keep your eyes open. There are guys that are like that. But we were talking about culture, and you did say that your wife is African. So let's hear a little bit about you. What's your ethnic background? You have any stories for us?
Oh gosh, uh, there's stuff I could tell you about Ugandan culture. I've met a lot of Ugandans that have come here.
But what about
Uh,
your culture?
so there's some things that are my culture and my wife's culture line up on. There's some things that differ. Um, so my wife is Catholic. I'm Lutheran. So when my wife told me she was Catholic, I was like, oh, okay. So are you like practicing? And she's like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, do you go to church? She's like, not ever since I became an adult. Like once my parents stopped taking me to church, I didn't feel the desire to go back because according to her, it's a very dry experience and it wasn't. She didn't feel like she was getting that much out of it, which I said was fair. And then she asked me what I was, and I told her I was Lutheran, and she said she had not heard of that. And I was like, well, we're not anti-Catholic, but our founder kind of created a huge problem for the Catholic Church when he founded Lutheranism. So I tried to explain to her that, in France, the Lutherans or the Protestants and the Catholics had a few wars about certain things, and I asked her like how much she knew about Catholicism, and there's things like relics, like what a holy relic is, or what sainthood is, and how not all saints are even Christian, or things like that she didn't quite know. But then again, it's one of those things that if you don't really have a desire to dive in and know about, it's not super important. Um, but yeah, aside from religion, religiously we're pretty aligned. Culturally, when I first asked her that she was from Africa, I had previously gone on a few dates with someone who was Nigerian, and their food is pretty. The food I had went between fufu, which is just kind of like mashed potatoes for any melanin deficient people listening. It's very bland, but it's kind of like a vehicle for other flavors. You can think of it almost like bread or mashed potatoes. And then there were some dishes they had that were just like really spicy. And like I can handle spice, but like some of them were just like they'll really clear out your sinuses. So I asked her if she had any type of dishes like that, and she's like, "Well, we eat a lot of like rice and corn, or she calls it maize, because they were colonized by the British, so they use some antiquated. She every now and then she uses very antiquated terms, and it's interesting because her vocabulary is probably a bit more than mine. She speaks 5 languages fluently. I speak maybe like 1.2. But yeah, so she told me that none of her food is spicy, and that was a relief to me. And she told me she eats like a lot of cabbage, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my background is German. We eat an insane amount of cabbage. Damn. So we culinarily our food's fairly similar. I'd say the main difference is that she eats orphals, like intestines, not regularly. Like it's on rare occasion, but in terms of my background, we never eat intestines. I think the closest we get is to maybe like a traditional sausage, which is made with like the lining of an animal, but then filled with like other meat. But theirs is more of like the tissue. Her background, there's different tribes in Uganda. There's dozens, maybe hundreds of languages. There's all sorts of tribes. There's lots of different kingdoms with kings and queens. So her mom comes from one tribe and her dad comes from another tribe. Her mom, I guess her whole family that are her parents' age or older lived through the Idi Amin dictatorship. And on my side, my mom's parents both lived through World War II. So my mom's dad was a Hitler Youth, and my mom's mom, she's the daughter of a farmer, but it's very nuanced talking about World War II because a lot of people don't realize that most German soldiers in World War II were conscripted. It's not like every single soldier there was just very passionate about racist views and decided they want to get a gun and fight anyone that was trying to stop them from exterminating a race. My mom's grandfather, so my mom's dad's dad, he was a violin player and he played on cruise ships. And then one day he got conscripted into the army. And when he got conscripted, he was placed at a fortification. And when the enemy soldiers came and finally, my great grandfather surrendered, they came and beat him within an inch of his life. And after that, he couldn't play the violin anymore. And he became a non functioning alcoholic. My grandfather's uncles, one of them was the mayor of his island and was head of the Nazi party on his island, but was, and a lot of people will just kind of say, like, there's no way that's true, but a lot of Nazis did not know what was going on in the labor camps. They did not know the extermination was going on. Basically, you just had a politician, you voted for the politician, that politician got into power, he gave everyone jobs, and you're like, great, that's really important to us, that we get employed. And you're not fully, it's not fully disclosed about everything that's going on. So after World War II, there was deprogramming camps that the Allies set up where a lot of people that used to be in the military or were in the Nazi party were deprogrammed and shown everything that they had contributed towards. So my grandfather's uncles, a lot of them committed suicide or became non-functioning alcoholics as well. Wow. And then on my grandmother's side, they had a farm in what is now Poland, but back when they first got the farm, it was in Germany, pre-World War I. And one day there was a knock on the door at like 2 a.m. and one of the neighbors came over and said, you guys got to get out of here, the Russians are coming. So they just she grabbed like a doll, and like her mom grabbed like a suitcase. They grabbed whatever they could, threw it on a horse-drawn carriage because they didn't have electricity on this farm or a car, and they started heading west. The Russians caught up to them eventually before they could get further deeper into Germany, and my great-grandfather was sent to the Gulag, and he's never heard from again. So, war has a lot of casualties on both sides. Like, it's tragic for everyone involved. But my grandfather, who was a Hitler Youth, he came to Canada back when there was East and West Germany. He came to Canada, migrated, brought over my grandmother. And when I was younger, he told me, because when I was younger, my mom's sister married an Iranian man. And I asked my grandfather about it because I said, you were in the Hitler Youth. Why did you approve? Like, I was young, so I didn't word things properly, but I asked, like, why did you approve your daughter marrying, an Arab or a Persian? Because, isn't that against everything that you were raised with? And he told me, well, like, as he's gotten older, he's realized that some of the things he was told were just other people trying to share their points of view with him, and he did not have the world experience to say whether or not it's correct. And, a few years ago, he passed away in, I think, 2018. But before he passed, he used to tell me when he was a kid, he was taught that a robin is always with a robin and a wren is with a wren. And a robin and a wren are two birds that look very similar, but they'll never interbreed because they stick to their own. He said that's kind of the doctrine he was taught as a child. But as he's gotten older, he's realized that it's very important that people don't just adhere to things they've heard and just adopt those as their worldview, that they actually think about why someone would say that and what the logic is, like the reasoning behind it. And he approved, if I wanted to like marry a black girl, he said, as long as you both are happy, that's all that matters. When my wife told her dad that she was marrying me, he didn't take it super well at first. He was not the biggest fan, you could say. Now we're pretty good. We don't talk very often, but he's happy with me. And he told me that the reason that he was kind of not crazy about the idea of his daughter marrying someone who wasn't black was that it wasn't necessarily because of, he doesn't believe in race mixing or anything, but more so like culture mixing. Because if you have two different cultures, it can be very difficult to come and cooperate on even ground. Like for one, like an example is if you're, let's say you're from a background where the man is the head of the household, and you fall in love with a girl or a guy or whatever, and they believe that women should contribute equally to the relationship in all aspects. if you're trying to reconcile those two things, it can be very difficult and cause a lot of conflict. Um, just to bring it back a bit to dating, um, when you're dating someone, I'd also say, like, in addition to trying to be as forward as possible, so you're both on the same page, you're not wasting each other's time. Another thing of that is promises are very easy to make, but when you're dating someone, you shouldn't date them with the expectation that they're going to change into something else. You should take things as they are, because from my experience, people rarely do things because it's like the better thing for them to do. Usually, people do things because they're put into a position where they're forced to do it. Like, my first car was a manual car. I bought a manual car for like $1,500, and then I need like $1,000 for repairs. So I bought my first car for like $2,500. It was a manual. I did not know how to drive manual. Why did I buy that car? Because it was cheap, and I was like 26. I decided I needed a car, and then I taught myself to drive a manual. But if I had never bought that manual car, there was no reason for me to ever learn how to drive manual. And the same thing is with a relationship. Like, if you're dating someone and they say like, oh, if we get married, I want to be in charge of all the finances, every financial decision the family makes. And then you're like, okay, I'm not okay with that. And they're like, okay, maybe in the future I'll change my mind about that, and we can get closer to a 50-50 agreement on how finances should be run. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that's not a good bet. If you're going to be betting with your time and your emotional energy into something, really try and just judge people for how they are. People usually show you who they are as they are in that moment. Trying to expect them to change to something else isn't that great. I apologize to anyone listening that feels like I just go in kind of tangents and then reel it back, but that's kind of like how my mind wanders. And I know it's doesn't make for very good like essay writing or anything like that, having like, step by step. But just kind of like how conversations with me go.
That's fine. Like, I think you're the third guest to apologize for going on. And remember, most of the time I'm doing this podcast, it's me talking to myself, basically, right? So
Yeah.
I feel more sane when there's an actual guest, as well as, like, remember, it is a mindset podcast. So we're here to hear the stories of other people, talk about different things that are important to us, and not everything's streamlined. Like the last episode, we kept running it back, and it kind of became a joke where it's just like, okay, we're gonna talk about something, and we're gonna just throw a little bit of shade to rewind back to that point. And sometimes a little bit, it's better for the content as well. So it's like, oh yeah, wait, they were talking about that. Oh, and it kind of, it's another way to focus on the certain points that we talk about. And I really enjoyed your story. It was definitely not what I was expecting. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna talk about this. I'm like, okay, and I just let you talk, and it's definitely interesting because I feel like we were in an era where we could come more together even if we had differences. Like, I'm gonna do what I was just talking about. Like, when we first met, we were at complete opposites. So it's just like, you're probably thinking, oh, this guy's a fucking dick. That's the language, right? But it's like, but it's something that kept us bonded as friends. I'm in your house. Like, I always say we're friends, right? So if we were friends, I wouldn't be here, right? But at the same time, I think, especially in this social media age, because we grew up with slow internet, so a lot of things were completely different. You have to be.
I remember when you try to look up an image on Google and it loaded in chunks.
Yes.
I don't know how many people here remember. You look up an image, it's not just the whole thing pops up. You have to wait like a good 30 seconds or more for the picture to show up.
Yeah, and if you go back a little bit further than that, you leave your computer on for 2 hours, and if you were one of those people, you're looking for a spicy picture. You're keeping your computer on, you're putting the monitor off, and you're on dial-up, and you're hoping that your parents don't get on the phone because, someone told you or someone sent you a picture, and you're waiting to see that picture.
Or if you can remember when your computer had speakers, and it would start going like bzz, 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 right before you're about to get a phone call.
Yeah, and then you're just like, no. Or you start freaking out. You'd hear the sound, right? And it's just like, no, everything that I was waiting for, gone within minutes. But going back to that, where there's clash with people, the same thing. It's like, once you bring up the conversation, actually have the table, like how we are around the table right now, around the table GTA, and physically around the table right now, you can understand a little bit more from where that person's coming from, right? Like, we have in the stories previously said two people from completely different backgrounds, but culturally, especially like with the food, you said the cabbage thing. I would have not known that if I haven't met you that cabbage was a big thing in Uganda and Germany, right? There's things that we kind of blindside ourselves to because we might be staying in certain groups, like how you said the robin and the fan, right? But they're still birds, right? And that's what people have to realize as well. There is a hidden stigma and other things, but a lot of these things are learned. So we need to be empathetic enough to be able to hear another side, even if it's something very extreme or odd. Because when we make comparisons about certain things, especially with history that's past, you can't you could call someone something from like a word that's not popular now, or a word you get in trouble for now, but 50 years ago it's not the same. But you have to realize that in that time frame it might have not have been offensive, or it might have been the norm where people will do these things. So we need to make sure that we can realize that people are changing, and not everybody's going to change right away. Not everybody's going to be at the same wavelength as you. And just like the icon for the podcast, two people could have the same information and take that completely different, right? Just going back again, how we met, Stranger Things. I was a fan on the other side. He was a fan on the other side, and we watched the same show. We got the same information, and it changed us in different ways. But discussing it brought us together.
Yeah, I want to say that it's such an important skill to learn in life on how to talk to people that have a different view. Like, there's so many people that say, like, if I can touch on like cancel culture and deplatforming, I personally don't think that cancel culture actually exists that much. Because if someone tells you you shouldn't listen to that person because they told a certain joke or they have a certain view, whether or not you listen to it, it depends on how much you're willing to let other people tell you whether or not, like, you don't have to agree with it. I'm not saying like, oh, this person, if someone says something controversial, you should agree with them because of freedom of speech. I don't believe in being a contrarian for the sake of just saying, oh, I'm different, I'm not a sheep or whatever. It's very important that people do have conversations. People do with different views do talk about things and see if they can reach some common ground. Because I think when people stop talking, like, that's when violence happens. Like, if you guys are talking about, I don't know if I'll go as far if I'll say that that's good advice for also like relationships and stuff, but it is, because if you're in a relationship and you feel like you're not getting through to the other person, just remember, violence is never the answer. Never, never go there. You cannot take that back. It is a bridge that will burn the moment you cross the other side. But always talk about your differences. If you have different views with someone, just be like, it's interesting that you say that. Why do you believe that? Figure out where they're coming from. Because you could always attribute to malice what is just ignorance, or maybe they're grown up a certain way. For instance, my wife growing up was taught, just want to say she does not have these views now. I'm just reporting on what she was taught growing up. So homosexuality in Uganda, it's a common held belief that homosexuality is almost like an STD. It is transferred by adults having adult relations with children, and then those children grow up to perpetuate the same trauma onto other children, and that is where homosexuality comes from. Which is why you might hear a lot of language about how Uganda is very anti-LGBT. And if you've grown up with being told that's what homosexuality is, then you'll also notice, if anyone does the research on it, very recently, Uganda passed an anti-LGBT bill that is, I think it's the death sentence or life imprisonment.
I think it's
pretty
both.
sure it might be both, but they describe it as aggravated homosexuality. And to a lot of people, what they just hear is just like, oh, that just means like if you're a guy and you kiss another guy in public, you're probably going to be killed on the spot. But in the actual bill, in the legal sense of what aggravated homosexuality is sexual relations between an adult and a minor, and also the if you do not disclose that you are HIV positive and you have relations with someone and then you have spread your HIV to them, that is also considered aggravated homosexuality. So there's a lot of people in the West that if you told them, hey, do you know there's a country where if you were to have adult relations with a child, you'll be put to death? There's a significant amount of people in the West. They're like, yeah, that sounds good. I don't disagree with that at all. Especially when you see things like, Chris Hansen going out there and catching people that want to do these things, and they're getting like 2 years in jail and then they're released. And it's not like they get 2 years and they're getting a psychiatric evaluation to make sure they're not a threat anymore. It's just kind of like, okay, they've done this thing. Let's put them in jail for 2 years. I do feel that affliction is something that people do need therapists for. I don't think just throwing someone in a cell is going to does anyone any good. I don't think they come out and suddenly like, okay, I'm not going to do that again because I don't want to go back in a cell. I don't think a deterrent is the correct answer to rehabilitating these people. I think they need therapy to figure out why do they feel that way, and get to the point where they no longer have the desire to cause harm, however they justify it in their mind. But when it comes to like things, as you said about how certain terms change over time. When my wife first got pregnant, her family was very excited about it, and her mother made a comment like she was so happy that there's going to be a half caste in the family.
Ooh.
And
it's a big African term.
Yeah, and I was like, "What?" And my wife explained to me like that's just what they're called at home. If you're half white and half black, you're half caste. And my wife used that term. Told my mom about how her family was so happy that there's going to be a half caste, and my mom got very upset because my mom was the daughter of two people that were alive in Nazi Germany and left Nazi Germany. So to hear terms like that, she was my mom took it a certain way and was very upset about it. But I kind of explained to her that it's more of a translation thing, where I'm sure. If you go back far enough to when Uganda was colonized by the English, they probably had certain terms, and these are the terms that people adopted at the time. And then when it stopped, when Uganda gained independence, these terms kind of just lingered behind. And it's language is a part of culture. So is like dress, clothing, food, all those types of things. Like I had a traditional wedding with my wife. And we couldn't go to Uganda because pandemic, but we still had a ceremony through Zoom. So it was held in my living room on this side, and then on the Ugandan side, there was like 100+ people. It was a huge deal. And it was for this ceremony, we had a traditional dress. So Ugandan women wear something called a gomesi, which is like a dress with large poofy shoulders, kind of pointy shoulders. It almost looked like pauldrons, but made out of cloth. If you're like a nerd and know about like medieval armor, you kind of get a picture. And then men wear something called a kanzu. And a kanzu is, you might have seen it if you see like Muslims on Friday. Some of the men, they wear like these long white robes that go all the way down to their ankles. And that's what I wore at my introduction ceremony. I wore a long white silk robe that also had a black blazer over it. So it's kind of like a half business, half like religious ceremony type look. And on the front of my kanzu is custom embroidered. It has a little lion on it. And they asked me what colors I wanted, and I said green and orange. Because at our wedding, the theme was green, silver, and gold. So yeah, it was really great. The entire ceremony lasted, I got on at about 1:30 in the morning, and it lasted till about 10:30 in the morning. And my family tried to attend it. Most people tried to attend it. They attended for like 30 minutes, and then they logged off because it was getting late. My brother didn't attend it, neither did his fiance, but that's okay. I'm sure they were busy. And my mom and my sister, they both got gomesis, and we all dressed up, and we all sat around, and the entire ceremony was almost all in Luganda. Very little of it was in English. But yeah, sat through the whole thing, and it was really fun. We ate a lot of food, had cake. It was great. I speak some Luganda because on my wife's family, her mom speaks a bit of English, but only enough to say like hi, how are you, thank you, stuff like that. Um, Her dad speaks conversational English, but we don't talk. And then my mother-in-law's family speaks Luganda, which is the main language of Uganda. But then my mom, not my stepmom, my mother-in-law's mother speaks Swahili. So I'm also trying to learn a bit of Swahili, just so that when I go there later this year, I can talk to my in-laws because it'd be nice. As much as my wife is good at translating, I can tell she gets a little tired when she has to be like the middle person, translate every single thing back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's cute. That's cute that like you're embracing the culture as she's embracing the culture here, and you guys are lending each other hands, and it's nice to see that people are still coming together, especially with online internet personalities. We'll dive into that a little bit later, but you did say the thing about the condo, and you did talk about finances. So, as a father now and expecting your second kid, how has that changed your view on money, and what do you do to kind of keep yourself stable, especially with how the economy is now here in Canada?
okay. Great question. So this might be a little bit out of chronological order,
That's fine.
but just touching on things so that on the tail end of the culture topic. Um, so yeah, me trying to embrace the culture definitely helped, especially when it came time to pay a dowry, um,
Can
which
you
is something that's
explain
not
that is?
yeah something
Some
that's
people
not
don't know what
typically
that
done in
is.
the West. And when I told my friends about it and my family, they were very I'll be honest, when I first started dating my wife, a lot of my friends and family were extremely suspicious, seeing as how, she's a recent immigrant. Um, our relationship seemed to be going very fast, but that was due to us just being like on the first date, like, this is what I want, this is what I can provide. What do you want? What can you provide? Are we good? Okay, let's move forward. And so to the outside, it just seemed like this person had just come to Canada. They just landed. They just met me, and now they want money for me to send to her family. And when I first met her, she was sending money back to her family, which she doesn't do now, because we have financial obligations here. So, and her family's cool with it. Everyone's cool with it. That everyone understands that the money she has now has to go towards our family unit and growing us. Um, But yeah, when it came time to get a dowry, basically how a dowry works is they have it in certain cultures. I know India, it's fairly common. Most of Africa, it's fairly common. I think it's also common in some parts of East Asia. Um, but a dowry is essentially when you want to marry someone. Usually the man is the one paying dowry. I think in Indian cultures, the woman that pays the dowry. But in other cultures, the man pays the dowry where they approach the woman's family and they ask, I'd like permission to date your daughter or to marry your daughter, for the wedding. In layman's terms, how much does your family want as kind of like a deposit, um, so that I may marry your daughter? And to a lot of Western audiences, the language used when I placed a dowry was the bride price. So people would ask, did you pay the bride price? And if you translate that to a Western audience, it sounds as almost like it's a mail order bride or some form of slavery. Generally in the West, it's extremely frowned upon that you would pay money for a person, but you do not own this person as if they're property. If I pay a bride price, that does not mean that my wife is now my property. I can do whatever I want with her, that sort of thing. It's more so I've expressed interest in marrying someone. I'm going to give a deposit of money because money is something that almost everyone can agree has value. And I'm going to give this money so that this relationship is going to work. And if we get divorced, I would get the money back. And some people might say, like, oh, well, why even bother? Just say you're not going to get divorced. But I think, and for a Western audience, a lot of men can agree. There's a lot of women. A common complaint among women about dating is that men don't seem to want to commit. Some people, you know, my brother, love him to death. He's been engaged for over 5 years. Why doesn't he get married? Well, getting married is a whole different step. There's now a lot of legal stuff that's involved. If you get divorced, there's a good chance that things won't go well for you, especially if you have children. Your wife is the main caregiver. You're going to get the short end of the stick as a guy. But by paying a dowry, you both, especially as a man, I think as a man, you should be a big fan of paying a dowry. Just my personal opinion. You can disagree. That's totally fine. I understand there's different cultures. But as a man, I think paying a dowry is a great idea because, her family, if you guys have trouble, you have more incentive to make things work. You have more incentive to, all this go well. I think without a dowry, if you're in a relationship, if you and your wife aren't getting along, you decide you want a divorce, both sides of the family are pretty much being like, oh, that's a shame, but you got to live your best life, go forward with it. When you pay a dowry, if you guys have problems, people step in and be like, well, what are your problems? Maybe you can work it out. Maybe you're rushing to conclusions. Maybe this is like, this is a miscommunication, or this is a temporary problem. And both your families are very, very motivated to make sure that you guys, if you are going to go ahead and get married and move forward, that you guys do have a happy life and you don't break things off early when, maybe it's just a small, something that is trivial, but at the moment just seems really huge. And yeah, because I've embraced the culture and my family wanted to wear the ceremonial clothing for the introduction ceremony and wanted to stay up all through the night for the introduction ceremony with the time difference and everything, my dowry is very low. Very affordable, I should say. It's affordable, and I'm very happy with it, and I'm very thankful to my wife's family that they were so considerate. Generally, if the other family isn't too sure about you or they don't like you, the dowry can get very expensive. But for me, it was very affordable. I didn't have to borrow any money. It was a good time. I'm strongly support dowry. I hope my daughters, when she meets a guy, he'll pay me a dowry. But I'm not holding my breath because I'm sure, my wife is Ugandan, but my daughter is only like, the daughter of an immigrant. So I don't have any high expectations that she's going to pressure whoever she's marrying into getting a dowry. And my wife didn't really pressure me to pay a dowry, but it was something I felt like I should do. Because she told me that, like, her and her father didn't have the best relationship when we got married. Mm-hmm. So she's like, there's no real, if you want to get married but you don't want to pay my dad a dowry, like, I'm fine with that. But, being me, I always think ahead. I'm like, this is someone I'm going to meet in the future. I don't want to start this off, his impression of me is, oh, this is like a Mzungu, or white people in East Africa are called Mzungus. So I don't want him to think like, oh, this Mzungu, he didn't even pay me a dowry. He doesn't respect me. He doesn't respect my culture. I'm going to meet this guy in person one day. I don't want to get off on the wrong foot. So, I just came forward. I'm like, hey, it's nice to meet you. I'm dating your daughter. We decided we wanted to get married. Can I have your blessing? If you'd like a dowry, what would you like? And yeah, it was a lot less than I thought, because I had all sorts of quotes from the internet saying it's going to be like 5 figures or even 6 figures worth of money, and I basically, forget about ever putting a down deposit on a house or anything. Like, this is all just going towards the dowry. But no, it was very reasonable, and he just told me that you also have to promise you'll have a white wedding. So we had the traditional wedding for Uganda, which is the introduction ceremony, and then we also had a white wedding here, which is, it was officiated by a Lutheran pastor, and it was in a chapel, and we had a whole, like, food and decorations and all that stuff, and yeah, it was really good. So I'm just leading with that, because now talking about the condo and what happened to the condo is...
I'm just going to butt in a little bit. Going back to the dowry, I'm going to put, like, my take on it too, because in my culture, we use the same term, bride price. It's practiced sometimes, it's not practiced sometimes, but I also see it as it shows that the party is serious, right? Because a lot of people are dating, your daughter could be talking to all these guys, but if a guy's like, I'm willing to spend this much money because I really want to be with your daughter, and whatever obstacle that you're throwing there, it shows initiative as well.
I'd just like to add that for Western audiences to get like just a bit more understanding of how a dowry works. Like a lot of Western audiences, like on 90 Days Fiance, there's a guy from Scotland and he's dating a girl from Kenya, and again East Africa goes through the whole dowry. It's very what he went through is very similar to what I went through. Um, he paid more than I did. I'm not gonna tell you how much I paid, but you know, to him it was a lot of money. To me, I was really happy with the price that I was given. I think her family not knowing more about him affected how much they asked for. Um, but yeah, if you're from the Western world and you're saying like a dowry doesn't make any sense, it just seems like some sort of scheme to get money or anything, just think about like how much do men usually pay for an engagement ring? Like an engagement ring, like my grandfather, you know, the Hitler Youth, he was a watchmaker and he owned a jewelry store. And he always told me never buy jewelry because of how much it's marked up. So if you think, you know, you're buying an engagement ring, let's say you buy an engagement ring, it costs $3,000. It probably costs the jeweler maybe like $500, and it probably costs the person that sold it to that jeweler probably like $80. So for an engagement ring, you're paying $3,000 for something that effectively is worth $80. So $2,900 is gone. And why do they spend that money? Because it shows they care. And everyone is totally okay with someone spending money on an engagement ring and spending all this money just to show how much they care. And they go, well, yeah, it should be 3 or 4 months of your salary, and yeah, it should cost a lot of money, and you know, it like all these justifications for an engagement ring. But the moment you tell someone like, oh yeah, when I got married, I paid my wife's family X amount of money, they're like, wow, that's such a waste of money. That's such a ripoff. So it really comes down to just what people have accepted as part of their culture is okay and what isn't okay. And I would encourage anyone that, you know, if you meet someone who's paid a dowry, just kind of understanding like why they do that, trying to understand other cultures. You'll find that a lot of culture. I know this might be a hot take. I feel like culture is extremely overrated. I feel like people are way too defensive of the culture. I think there's a lot of people that they've entwined who they are so much with their culture that any attack against a culture is an attack against them, so they become extremely defensive. One example I can think of is if you ever see, like, the Italians I've met in real life are great people. On the internet, I feel like the internet skews. Everything is played to. Everything is just super, super exaggerated. And
sensationalized.
Like if you look at Italians online, someone eats pasta the wrong way or makes pasta the wrong way, they start having like a panic attack. Or they just become incredibly enraged that someone made pasta wrong. But pasta originally came from China in the form of noodles. So really, this part of Italian culture was actually borrowed from Chinese culture. And then you have Italians with like tomato sauce. How should tomato sauce be made? Should you add sugar to spaghetti sauce or should you not? But tomatoes didn't come to Italy until North America was colonized. You have Irish people with potatoes. Potatoes didn't come until North America was colonized. So all of this food is actually just bled over from other food. I grew up in Rexdale, which now has a fairly significant Somalian population, and I've eaten at a lot of Somalian restaurants. Strongly recommend Zawash at Rexdale Boulevard and Highway 27. Also Mushkaki at Rexdale Boulevard and Kipling is also very good. But if you go to a lot of Somalian restaurants, you'll notice that they offer, you can have it with either rice or you can have it with spaghetti. I always thought it was very interesting because I thought them having spaghetti paired with these traditional Somalian dishes was them trying to appeal to the Canadian palate. But actually, the reason that spaghetti is actually authentic Somalian food is because Somalia was colonized by the Italians.
Oh, wow.
And when the Italians came, they introduced spaghetti, so it became part of their palate. The same thing you can see with Jamaicans. You know, Jamaican patties, fantastic. But, you know, if you have the Jamaican patty itself is an offshoot of a type of bao, which is a Chinese bun, which has a meat filling, and that's just their version of it. They have turmeric to make it that yellow that makes it so famous, and that turmeric was influenced by the Indian immigrants that came to Jamaica. I will say that jerk chicken is authentically Jamaican. Good for them to invent that. But you'll notice that a lot of food is just borrowed from another culture, and then people say, I don't want people saying, for some reason, people acknowledging that their culture has aspects of another culture cheapens and reduces the authentic the legitimacy of their culture, which again, by proxy, delegitimizes their identity. And I just think we really should try and get away from that because it causes people to kind of group themselves up into these different little tribes. And when you say, like, I'm part of this group, you're part of that group, I'm very different than what you are, I think the main thing people have to remember is we're all about 99% the same. Like, whenever we have conflict, it's that 1% that's different. Like, almost everyone, they care about family, they want to have a good future, they want to be able to provide for themselves and others. They have maybe some spirituality to them. They believe that they have a greater purpose. Like, we're all, not to be all cliche, we bleed the same blood. I mean, some people are type O, some AB negative, whatever. But like, negative. For the most part, we're 99% the same. And I think if people just started focusing more on what they have in common, the world would be a lot better place. People go to a lot of extremes, and there's a lot of hate in the world because people can be 99% alike, and then they meet someone with that 1% difference, and they're like, that 1% is enough reason for me to hate you. And it's just not great for the world.
I think that's definitely an interesting take. I feel that it's also a very GTA take, mainly because I think both of us grew up here with a lot of multiculturalism, right? So it's easier for both of us to understand and have that mindset. But there's other areas in the world where people don't interact with so many other people. So it's easier for us because we have that experience compared to other people where they could be boxed in, or all they see is the media depiction of certain groups of people and races, or what they've heard from their family that's traveled. And I see stuff all the time, because when see stuff online, it's like, oh, don't go here because they treat you like this. It's just like, well, is it because of your race, or is it because of the way that you acted over there?
Definitely. And like, yeah, like, for instance, if let's say I grew up in Nunavut, and I've never met a Jewish person in my life, and then I turn on the TV and I see Jews crawling out of sewers, I might have, which is very topical if you're watching this in the future. I just recently discovered that under Brooklyn Synagogue, there's a tunnel system. But you might have all these. If you've never met the person and that's all you have to go on, I can see how you might have those type of views. But every Jewish person I've met, literally every Jewish person I've met, except maybe one or two, has been extremely nice and like not what is portrayed in the media. I think the same thing is shown. If you grow up in an area that doesn't have a lot of black people. But then when you turn on the TV and you see, I think there's certain areas like BET. I certainly don't think their objective is to dispel any negative stereotypes about the black community. I think that there's certain people that, you can see it on TikTok a lot. You can see it a lot on the internet where people play into negative stereotypes about black people for attention. There's a financial incentive to portray them as either uneducated or violent or criminals, because that will get the most views, which is a shame. But then again, I have the benefit of living in Toronto and interacting with black people, and seeing that everything is just super exaggerated on the internet. I think it's very important for people. Both Tails and I are in our 30s, so like we're a bit older now. And there's a lot of new lingo that every now and I feel myself getting older by the day, because I find new terms online, and I'm like, oh, is that what the kids are saying these days?
Yeah.
But yeah, touch grass, like, for sure. Go out there, meet people, have conversations. Like, you've probably seen it. I think it was around like 2012. There was this huge explosion of just like these very, very hostile feminists online. And they were very loud, and they got a lot of attention, and they, now it's been dispelled that the wage gap was a myth, which I always felt. But there was definitely a time where if you said that online, people would dogpile on you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the idea, you could say, no, like, legally, legally that can't exist. And if it does exist, there should be lawsuits, because if there's sexual harassment lawsuits, there should definitely be, like, you're getting paid, significantly cheaper for doing the same work or breaking contract or stuff like that. But if even nowadays, when people identify as a feminist online, there's still now a stigma, because people go back, who were the loudest people back then and what were they like?
Exactly.
And back then, it was loud. It was people telling people to shut up, listen to me, and it was just there was no conversation. It wasn't like, this is what I believe. What do you believe? Let's see if we can reach some common ground. It was literally telling people, do not talk. And anytime someone is trying to have a conversation and they tell the other person, you're not allowed to talk, the other person's going to stop listening.
And that's a big red flag. And going into that, where we need to have the discourse, right? Because, like I said, we're both internet people. Obviously, like, we're actual people too. We're not generated AI or anything like that. But
not yet, at least.
Not yet. Maybe there'll be AI around the table GTA in the future. 2080. You could live stream this. There'll be holograms of us.
It'll farm the algorithm so that what we talk about, every sentence is just gold and can make an excellent soundbite that'll then be shared through TikTok AI.
Exactly. We're going to be there for the future. This is thinking in the future, 60 years plus, etc. But it's always a big warning sign, and for the younger people that are here, because I got doxxed. You showed my age. Well, no, you guys already know. I'm getting up there. I'm grandpa, right? You can call me Grandpa Tails. He knows me as Tails. Other people know me from other names. He's the first guest who's actually didn't drop my government name, so thank you. Right? So either way, it's a big warning sign, because if you're silenced, people who are silenced, they group together where people don't know, and then they plan things. So if you're not careful and you try to silence people because you think that they're a bad person, guess what? They're going to go find somewhere, people say safe space. They're going to find a safe space for themselves, and they're going to plan something, and something crazy might happen. That happens all the time. So we need to make sure that we keep these conversations open, and don't other people while you're being an other. It doesn't make sense. You're doing the exact same thing that you're telling people they shouldn't be doing, and then you're trying to control conversation. It's something that doesn't make sense, and it's going to bite you in the back in the long run too. So it's good to keep an open mind, and even if you find out that, hey, I'm significantly more different than that person now, it's your choice to end that relationship or not converse with those people. But you shouldn't burn the bridge for no reason, because everybody learns at a different pace. What you understand today, you might understand differently tomorrow, right? That's why every time you go back, and I hope the kids are still saying cringe, you'll go back, we'll probably listen to this like, oh man, I was so cringy. Every time you go back, you're going to think it's cringe, because you grow and you get better, hopefully, right? Some people, it's harder for them to change, but experience, exposure, and time with other people who are not like you will develop you into a better person in general. That's how I feel anyways.
So Trayvon Martin. Okay, so Taylor's just like, man, this guy's out of pocket.
You try to cancel my podcast?
So yeah. Okay. Just get you demonetized.
Yeah, we'll put this on the Under the Table. The first band episode goes up. This is
if you go to Tails Patreon, you get all these juicy outtakes. I'm
gonna just put an intro. It's just like, welcome to the first episode of Under the Table. We got banned, so
now we're here. But yeah, so when Trayvon Martin happened, my best friend from high school, we both had very different views on it. Because, Trayvon Martin, for those that you don't know, he was a youth that was killed by George Zimmerman, went to trial. George Zimmerman was found not guilty of murder. He got a self-defense acquittal. And when I heard this news, I was studying to be a paralegal, and my best friend was finishing his last year of high school, and he wanted to also go and become a paralegal. And I remember talking to him and being like, I can't believe he got acquitted. And my friend was like, why can't you believe it? And I said, well, because he was a youth, and he was just, he had a nice tea and Skittles, and he just got gunned down in this neighborhood. And my friend said, I believe that George Zimmerman was not guilty of murder. I believe that, it was self-defense. And I got very upset, because everything I had been told in kind of like the little echo chamber I was in was that this was this kid just got slain. Like, he was just walking around, someone saw him, didn't like that he was black, just shot him dead, stuff like that. And I got really upset, and it almost ruined our friendship because I didn't want to hear I was told at that time that anyone that said that Trayvon Martin wasn't innocent was racist and just wanted to see, like, black kids get killed. And kudos to my friend. He came. He's like, I don't want this to ruin our friendship. He's like, the entire trial is online. Have you watched the trial? He's like, it's like 8 hours. Have you watched the 8-hour trial? And I'm like, I've seen snippets. And he's like, okay, if you really care about it, you're in law. You can watch the entire trial. You can see every single argument. You can see every single piece of evidence that's presented. If after you watch the trial, if there's anything you disagree with, we can talk about it because I don't want to lose this friendship.
Wow.
So I was like, sure. So I spent a weekend. I watched it in 2 parts. I watched 4 hours on Saturday and the rest on Sunday. I watched the whole thing, and I was like, yeah, based on all the evidence and every argument made, it looks like this was self-defense. And, there's not going to be people in your life, you should never expect that people are always going to be that, I guess, compassionate and that understanding that they're going to approach you and be like, hey, I know we've had this major disagreement. Can we talk about it? There's a lot of people that when you have a huge argument or a huge blow up, they're going to be like, this person is just a negative aspect of my life. This person, is draining my energy. I don't need that in my life. I'm going to go find someone that doesn't drain my energy that way. But you'll find that when you have these type of conversations, you grow as a person because you yourself now in the future don't jump to conclusions so quickly. You learn a lot more conflict resolution, a lot more on how to de-escalate situation, things of that nature. And again, when you start, as Tails has said about how online you can find yourself in these little echo chambers where you don't get a greater view. Can we move on to influencers? And
we can, I'm just gonna take my take on your take.
Okay.
No, I'm not going to edit it out because I think what you said, like, you don't even want to hear, like, if I talk about certain stuff, that will 100% be on under the table when we eventually have under the table, because I have a lot of hot takes, and because, like I said, I talk to different people. I had the conspiracy theory episode. I was supposed to say C theory. Whatever. I know when I post this on YouTube, it might get shadow banned, but it is what it is. It's also going to be on Spotify, guys, so it is what it is. I have a lot of hot takes on certain stuff, and it's actually separated me from a lot of people because, similar to your friend, if someone tells me about something and I disagree, I'm going to make sure that I have all the information. I'm going to come back to you and be like, this is why I disagree. Why? Because I don't like being wrong. that's one thing. I do not like being wrong.
I don't think there's anyone that goes through life and they're like, yeah, I believe some things that I know are wrong. Like, I don't think anyone is like that.
You'd be surprised because there's a lot of ignorant people in the world, right? But just going back to it, like, number one, I don't like being wrong, right? Especially if I'm giving information, because I'm giving misinformation. Unless, I don't know if you see that meme, when I post misinformation online, unless I'm purposely trying to post misinformation. No, because the thing is, especially something like that where it's so sensitive, it's something that could completely destroy a person. You need to make sure that you will be able to tread lightly, especially if that person isn't at your level of growth. And that's not looking down on people, but it's understanding that empathy, compassion, and understanding are different tiers with everybody, right? I have friends, and I've talked about this in older episodes, where they will not understand an analogy. You can't give them an example for something unless they go through it themselves. They will have no compassion. They'll tell you that it's stupid. They'll say, oh, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. But once they come and go through it themselves, they'll be like, oh, Alex, this topic, it's so heartbreaking. I told you that 2 years ago, Alex. Yeah. I told you 2 years ago, and you told me I was stupid. Oh, but it's different now. There's some people who are like that, and I think anybody as a person, you have to understand that you're gonna grow. Like, you have a newborn baby, right? And you're gonna have a brand new, fresh baby. You're not gonna yell at a baby because they don't understand, French. It's a baby. Right?
Oh, I have so much.
Right?
I don't know how much
But
time we have. 3 hours? Great. I have
we,
so much to talk about children's television now that I'm like really exposed to it.
but you know what? I think we should save that for another episode because
Okay.
we're almost at the 130 mark, which is fine. I could keep going. We could both keep going. And I want to get at least through some of the topics that you talked about previously. And I've already talked to, I'm going back and making sure that I have double episodes. So even if we do have a second episode, it'll be like a year from now, 2 years from now. Maybe you could even review the episode so that you could see, oh, how much have I grown? Because even my first 4 guest episodes, some of the people are completely different, right? Or their views have changed drastically because of certain things that has happened.
Yeah, I wanna like on the tail end of what you said about people growing. There's one quote I really like, and it's that people see the world not as it is, but as they are. And I heard that when I was a teenager. I had no idea what it meant. I had a vague understanding. I was like, "That's a good quote. It's something deep." I'll probably like repost it and and be like, hashtag deep or like think about that. Try to be like a pseudo intellectual. But for anyone that doesn't understand it, I think a good example is when we talk about like homelessness. So this might tie into like finances, but whenever people talk about homelessness, they're always like, "Oh man, we should really do something about the homeless people. We should really like go and try and get some effort to give them homes." And the reason I think a lot of people think that way about homelessness is they look at a homeless person and they don't see them as a different person than them. They're like, if I was in that position, what would I need to get out of that situation?
Yep.
So they're like, man, if I was homeless, all I would need was a home. Because if I had a home, then I could apply for jobs because I'd have an address. I could start building my life together. If I had a home and I had food, like I'd have the building blocks I need to start, getting my life in order. So I won't talk too much about my personal experience. Just to tie it back to the condo, I found a couple homeless people through Facebook and said, "Hey, I noticed that winter is coming. It's already November. Winter is coming. It's going to get cold. I have an extra room in my condo. Would you like to stay there? And you can pay some rent, whatever the government will give you for rent. Then you can just pay that, and it's fine." So I was under the delusion that all these people needed was just a place to stay. If they had a warm place to sleep and they had food, they could start applying to jobs, everything would fall into place. That did not work out. My mom bought a property in Windsor, also rented out to about 5 homeless people, and had it as a boarding house. That did not work out. The problem with when people talk about homelessness is they keep on thinking, if I was in that position, what would I need? And they don't think about what does this individual person actually need. And the amount of support a homeless person needs to really get their life in order is so much greater than people think. They need a therapist. They need a lot of them maybe need an addictions counselor. They need a personal financer to like help, because a lot of people don't know how to budget or don't know how to handle any sort of money. Like there's so many, you need people that teach them, basic how to keep up good hygiene, how to keep their place clean. Like there's so much work that goes into actually getting a homeless person to the point where they won't end up back in homelessness. But it's so much easier for people to just be like, "Oh, we'll just open up more homeless shelters, or oh, we'll just throw some money at it." And that's what a lot of people whenever they see problems, are like, let's just throw money at it until it goes away, which does not address the problem, and it just keeps on going. And you find politicians that say that they're just going to throw money at the problem, it's going to sort itself out. And it's as someone who has gone down that road and actually hands-on tried to help homeless people, it's very frustrating to just see that there's such slow advancement towards solving the homelessness problem. And on that note, in terms of finances, it's very important that people, I always look at life like a video game. Like there are certain video games that I played growing up that I acknowledge I was privileged to have and to play, because not everyone had those experiences. Maybe not a video game, but like I always think about like the Pokemon trading card game. A lot of kids had Pokemon cards. Very few people knew how to play it. My siblings and I knew how to play it. We made our own decks. We played each other, and we knew. And we didn't understand. We went to school, and no one else knew how to play this game. And it's now that I'm older, I realize it's because when we were younger, our parents spent more money on Pokemon cards than other kids. And how does that affect whether or not you know how to play? Well, if you buy a booster pack, it's only $5. So every kid could afford a booster pack, and then at least you have some Pokemon cards. You're part of the fad. Everyone, can mingle. But if you want to learn how to play, you have to buy a deck, and a deck is $20. And not every parent is going to spend $20 on a pack of Pokemon cards. So my parents were, and because we bought a deck for $20, we also got the instructions on how to actually play the game. And then the video games I played when I was younger, maybe not like younger, like late 90s, early 2000s, we had a PC as our gaming console. We also had an N64, and we had a Sega Genesis before that. So we were very, very privileged in that way. So if you did not have a PC, you usually played console games that are mostly first-person shooters, racers, and things like that. There's very few strategy games on a console. They're mostly action games. But on a PC, you have games like SimCity. What does SimCity do? Teach you how to balance a budget. You're going to get a bit, if you allow gambling in your city, you're going to get a bit more money, but it's going to raise crime. How does that translate into real life? You can go ahead and you can have more money by eating crappier food, but you're going to have more money. So it's going to hurt your health, but you're going to have more money. And there's a lot of things in life where it'll cost a bit more, but you have to trade something else up. And I'm not telling people to go out and eat organic and just eat anything like non-GMO and all that stuff. I'm just saying that understanding that if you're in a tight financial spot, there are ways you can sacrifice one thing for another. And if you're not okay with sacrificing certain things, that's okay. But just understand that that is a decision that is being made. We also had games like The Sims. Sims teaches you how to furnish a place. Invest in a good bed first and foremost. If you are having bad sleep, it'll affect everything in your life. So, my wife and I, and even our daughter, we have Tempur-Pedics. Was it a good financial decision? I don't know. We're still
find
debating.
Out. Let's find out in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we'll find out in the next podcast. We'll talk about how it's been. So far, it's been great. We get good sleep, and that's especially important for my wife being pregnant, that she's comfortable when she sleeps, because we don't need any additional stress on top of like regular or everyday stress. And yeah, life is a video game. If you're trying to find a place to live, a lot of people do things backwards. So a lot of people say, I have a job that let's say after taxes I make $2,500 a month, and I'm gonna go and find a place to live because I want to move out of like my mom's basement or whatnot, and I find a place for $1,600. Well, that's already 60% of your take-home income, more than that actually. And now you have to think, well, what are my other expenses? And a lot of people get into this loop where it's kind of like when you have a credit card or you get like a lease a car or anything, where you say, can I afford it? And the question is this more than I make? And the real question is can I afford it? Is this more than I can afford in order to reach my goals for the future? So with where I live now, everyone that lives in this house, no one pays more than 30% of their income. And that way everyone stays fairly happy. No one has any financial stress because everyone can kind of afford it. Now, were there sacrifices that we had to make? Yeah. I share my kitchen with 3 adults that are not my family. But on the tail end of that, none of us have financial stress. And having to share a kitchen with 3 people that aren't my family is worth it to me to not have financial stress. Because financial stress, it ruined my parents' marriage. It ruins a lot of people's relationships. It adds so much stress to your house. If you can avoid financial stress, you're in a really good position. And I think anyone that's in a ton of debt, anyone that's paying more than $100 in interest on their credit cards can understand how stressful it is owing a bunch of money and not really having a plan to get there. So talking about money, can we talk about influencers that have ideas for people on how to make money?
Ooh, so this is where it's going to get spicy. This is going to be the spiciest take, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's become pretty popular, especially since the pandemic. Everyone got laid off, so everyone's now looking for money. Everyone's trying to figure out, how am I going to get ahead? There's kind of, there's the boomer generation. A lot of people are saying, oh, this is the doomer generation, where everyone's saying, we're never going to own anything. We're all just going to work until we die. There's no point in really going forward. And that's why a lot of people, they go out every weekend and just party and spend all their money because they're like, what's the point even trying to save when everything is going to be bad anyways? Might as well just enjoy the moment, which is a very I feel like nihilism can be useful in some aspects, but you shouldn't allow it to be like the overarching theme over your life where you just say nothing matters, so why try? I don't know, it just seems, at least to me, it's just such a defeatist attitude, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you just say everything's going to be bad, and you make no efforts for anything to be good, then yeah, everything's going to be bad, and you can take some solace in knowing you're right, but it's generally, I mean, I don't know you, but I want good things for you, And if you think that your life is just going to be terrible at times, I would implore you to just keep an eye out for opportunities that, hey, maybe life won't be terrible. I feel like there's a lot of people online that they see things online, like, Andrew Tate is very popular right now, and he's telling people, hey, just go out and start your own business. Just work really hard, work nonstop. There's the Sigma grind set. Everyone should just be day traders online and just gamble all their money every day and hope it works out. And there's so many people now just looking for someone to guide them, someone to tell them what to do. When you start preschool, you don't really know why you're in school. I think there's a lot of people that it's not until much later they realize why they're really in school. And it's to train you so that you can join the workforce when you become an adult. And there's a lot of people that graduate high school, and when they're trying to figure out what to do next, their parents say, go to college. Go to college, you'll get a good job. So they go and they pick up a degree, and they pick up a degree in what they're passionate about. And, when people say if you should follow your passion, I feel like this is just this whole psyop by the educational community. Just to go into context.
It's turned into a C theory episode.
Conspiracy theories for a second. I think this is a whole psyop. Just think about it. You have a university. If you offer someone let's say a liberal arts degree. Someone has a liberal arts degree. What job can they get with that? What can they do with a liberal arts degree? Or how about you tell someone, oh, I graduated cum laude in art, and I'm the top of my class as an artist. Any job that involves hiring an artist, they don't ask for your certificate or your diploma. They ask for your portfolio. Your portfolio you can put together having never gone to art school.
Use ChatGPT now.
Yeah, I mean, also artists, I don't know, AI art, it's kind of intimidating. But maybe you're a writer. If you're a writer, no one's going to say, oh, did you graduate from like a creative writing class? Do you have a PhD in English? People want to see your work if you're going to something creative. If you follow your passion and your passion is like engineering, oh, fantastic. Go for it. Go get an engineering degree. Because those are things, if you're designing a building, people want to know that building's not going to collapse. People want to know that you have done all the research, you know what you're talking about. But like, I would implore you not to spend money on these colleges and universities that want to sell you a dream as if somehow if you take this course it's going to translate into a better career. They are telling you to take tons and tons of money, and especially at 18 you don't know how hard it is to save up $30,000. But if someone says, hey, give me $30,000, I'll give you an education, and your parents are telling you, yeah, go for it, like, you don't really understand the gravity of what you're getting yourself into. And yeah, education, like, definitely, it's upsetting on like a lot of levels to think of how much higher education has no practical application. It is people telling you like, oh, you should just take it, even if you don't get a job, it'll help you grow as a person. Take it from someone that's a bit older than maybe some of you listening. You are going to grow whether you like it or not. You are going to grow whether you pay for education or not. Whether or not, like, you're not going to go and pay a tuition and then go to a school and then, you're going to be faced with, like, moral dilemmas, or, like, you're going to have to, like, stand in a room while your dog gets euthanized or something and have to, like, emotionally grow from that. You're not going to go into a university and they're going to tell you, like, how to look at the nuances of things that can be portrayed as racist or actually just a cultural misunderstanding. Those things are not going to be taught to you. You are not going to be taught things that have, in most cases, real-world applications. I would strongly encourage you, if you are going to pay money for education, you have to look at it as an investment. And as an investment, you have to look at, what are the odds of me actually getting my money out of this? What are my odds of actually, this not just being, because it's not just your money, it's also your time. 4 years in school, especially if you're looking for a job now, the number of people looking for people who have experience in jobs, and people do not have experience in jobs, but they have a college degree. There are so many people with college degrees. The market is saturated. People want to know that you actually have done this. You actually know what you're talking about, and not just that you were really good at memorizing textbooks. Because in a lot of jobs, just being able to memorize textbooks, because if you think about, like, what is an exam? Every exam you take in college and university is what you've learned over the last semester. So all you've proved is that you can memorize a fact and hold it for 6 months. And a lot of employers aren't looking for that. They want to know that how fast can you learn? Are you good with the changing landscape? Can you perform the job we need you for? And I would just, yeah, if you see anyone that's studying you see someone studying broadcasting, or you're seeing someone studying especially you see someone's like, oh, I'm going to get a psychology major, just please tell them that maybe it's not a great idea. You're kind of crapping all over their dreams, but just let them know they can achieve their dreams other ways than that. So when it comes to people ever since the pandemic, there's Andrew Tate. There's people, OnlyFans has exploded. These people are trying to tell you, if you do this, if you followed my advice, you will become wealthy. If anyone has any experience with multi-level marketing schemes, that's exactly how they operate as well. The average person makes far less than minimum wage per the amount of hours they invest into it. And then the top 5-10% maybe make a livable wage or get really rich, but for the majority of you, that will not happen no matter how hard you try. It's important to know that you can try your absolute hardest and still fail. And that shouldn't stop you from trying. But if you're going to put that much effort and energy into something, you should really be cautious about what exactly you're investing that in. OnlyFans is really interesting because, in Canada, we have revenge porn laws. So if you send explicit photos of yourself to someone and then that person shares those things without your consent, that is a crime. They can be charged criminally for that. OnlyFans is difficult because you have consented to sharing those things online, but now someone has shared that without your consent. But instead of this now being a criminal case, it's actually a tort law because now they've just committed copyright infringement. They haven't spread anything necessarily without your consent because those were private and never supposed to be released to the public. Those were supposed to be released to the public, but with a payment plan. And now you have to go to court, and now you have to hire a lawyer, and now you have to prove that you suffered damages and what those damages are. And again, for 90% of people doing OnlyFans, you're not going to prove that they caused enough damage financially to you that's going to cover your legal fees. So they're going to get away with it. And even if you do cover it, I guarantee you every single person on OnlyFans, 100% of them, they have nudes that are being traded on there on the dark web or whatever without their consent, and they're not getting paid for it. You cannot have complete control. Since the 90s, we were told everything on the internet will be there forever and everyone will see it. But for some reason, people that, we could have a whole podcast about me having studied law and how the legal system is absolutely broken. Everyone is just sorting grains of sand on the beach. It's all chaos, and people are trying to make order out of it. But it's absolutely, the entire system is broken, but people just aren't exposed to it yet. They don't know how broken the legal system is, that they have all this confidence that, oh, it'll be fine. But they haven't experienced it. They just have this faith that should something go wrong, I'll be protected. And it's not how it works. I can promise you that the majority of you. Random fact, Tails, did you know that most murders are unsolved? Most.
I did not know that.
Yeah. You'd think, what percentage of people get murdered and they never find the killer? You'd be like, oh man, it's probably 5%. If it's really high, 10%. No, it's 53%. So the odds of you winning, I did the math once, the odds of you winning the Powerball in America, that lottery, you're more likely to get away with 27 consecutive murders than to win the lottery. So, and if you translate that, if you think of the 649, just to win the 649 to win $5 million, you could commit about 20 murders, and you have the same chance of getting away with all those murders than you do of winning that lottery. Damn. The legal system is terribly broken. It's horribly overburdened. People wonder, why do Toronto police officers get paid 6 figures? They can't get them fast enough. They can't get enough of them. They can't figure things out enough. If any of you have ever gone to the landlord and tenant board, like I have,
oh boy,
you file it, you have to pay to file it. If you're lucky, you'll get seen in 6 months. If that gets adjourned, it's another 6 months. If you have a problem with your tenant, all that money just gets piled up. Like, they just stop paying rent the moment you tell them you're suing them, and then it just builds up. And then let's say that you get a judgment, and they say, okay, yeah, they do owe you, 18 months in rent now at this point. Now you have to actually collect on that judgment. If they're on government assistance, you can't collect anything from them. You can't garnish government assistance, and they have no assets. So, great, you spent all this money to prove that you're owed all this money, and you still can't collect. And there's nothing you can do. And then people wonder, why are the rent prices out of control? It's because more and more people are realizing they never have to pay rent if they're on government assistance. Like, you can game the system so that the government will tell you that you don't owe anything. So then landlords raise rent to offset the prices or offset the risk of renting to people in the first place. But now because rent has gone so much higher, other people look at that and they realize, oh, I can sell my house for more. Why wouldn't I be able to sell my house for $1 million when I live in Jane and Finch? People are renting out in Jane and Finch for $2,800 a month.
That's wild.
Like and the problem, whenever I talk to people like this, they think I'm a conspiracy theorist. But I'm like, please take 5 minutes, look up whether you can garnish people on government assistance. Look, like there's trends, like with the whole. If you looked at all of okay, let's take an example for Zoom. The company Zoom, where you have all these office meetings online. If at the beginning of the pandemic, before your place shows up, as soon as they start announcing that they're thinking of making it so that people can't come into work, if at that time you're like, oh crap, I know about 6 months from now, everyone's going to be working from home. You then start looking at companies that offer services to let people work from home, and you could invest in them, and then they'll go up. So it's just kind of like just seeing what the gathering storm is as these things come in. One example is during 2020, at the beginning of 2020, I had about $20,000 saved up. I had it all in stocks. I made it into $40,000 in 1 year. Day trading is gambling. But now that I've put that disclaimer out there, at the beginning of COVID, I decided I want to play stock market. I had a lot of time on my hands. So I looked up. I'm a diabetic. I use a continuous glucose monitor, which little device goes inside your arm. I know I'm talking fast, but that's because I don't want this to take any much longer than it has to.
No problem. So
the continuous glucose monitor, there's like 4 companies that make them. There's Dexcom, there's like 3 others. One of them is like Freestyle Libre and like whatever. So I looked at the performance of those 4 companies, and at the beginning of, as you know, beginning of COVID, stock market took a huge hit on everything. Everything was going down. There's only 4 companies that made continuous glucose monitors, and one of them was Dexcom. And while the other 3 companies were going down, Dexcom was almost level. It wasn't going up, wasn't going down, it was just almost level. So I said, if I wanted to invest into this medical technology, which out of these 4 companies would I invest in? It would be Dexcom, because it's the only one not suffering right now. So it's, by default, the best one. So I put all my money into it, and within 2 months it increased by like 20%, and I pulled out. And I did that with just one company after the other. I didn't get on the GameStop thing, because GameStop, I used to work at a casino, and the idea that things have been really good up until this point, so they're going to continue getting really good past this point, that's a gambler's fallacy, and I would strongly encourage you guys not to follow that. So the entire time at GameStop, I'm like, okay, maybe now it's the ceiling. Maybe now it's the ceiling. And there's a lot of people that at one time they could have sold, but they hodled, and they lost money in the end. Yeah. So,
I lost $80.
You'll find, with Andrew Tate and all these other things, OnlyFans, there's a very strong relationship between opportunity and likelihood of success. If someone comes to you and they say, buy my book, buy my master class, and I guarantee you will be as successful as me. I think we've all seen it with cryptocurrency, where people say like, oh, this cryptocurrency has gone up 5 times in value over the last year. If you buy it now, in 10 years, cryptocurrency will be worth like 100 trillion. And it's like, okay, but you understand that you can't have cryptocurrency worth 100 trillion because there's only like 30 trillion worth of assets in all the world. So things can't just keep on this trajectory forever. And a lot of con artists, that's what they are. They'll go out there and tell people, hey, invest in this. It's done this well so far. So if we all invest in this, we'll all be rich. If every single person just puts all their life savings into this, the entire population will become millionaires. And it's like, but if we're all millionaires, then the inflation will be so high that it'll make no difference.
Yeah, but when people are desperate, like...
But when people are desperate,
It's pretty crazy. So we're going to circle back, we're talking about stuff like homelessness and stuff, and that affected... When you're at a certain point, your mindset changes. So it's very important to make sure that you are aware of your surroundings, aware of what you're listening to as well. I heard a piece of advice recently, which was interesting, where it said you don't take advice from someone who you don't want to be like, right? And I was just like, damn. Because sometimes there's random advice online and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool. But it is good to make sure you don't take every piece of advice, because, if you took every piece of advice or you listened to everything that everybody said, it could have turned you into a completely different person, right? And we've had stories on that. So I think this is actually the longest podcast episode, but we're almost at the 2 hour mark. Um, so before we do end it, is there any final thoughts that you want to add? And is there anything that you want to advertise as well?
So yeah, I'd say like my final thoughts are practicing kindness is really important. Um, Patience is really important. Uh, you can make a lot of bad decisions when you're in a bad mental state, whether you're upset or depressed. Um, Sometimes it's good, drink a glass of water, go for a walk, take a breath, and then come back at a different time. It's kind of like I used to do Sudoku puzzles, and sometimes I get stuck and I get frustrated, and then I leave and I come back maybe like 10 minutes later, and then the next numbers are just obvious. So sometimes you just really need to take a break. In terms of things I want to plug, my wife is an entrepreneur, and she's very, very good at pretty much everything she touches. So we have a company called Opulence. It's registered with the government. It's an official. It's not just one of those things people run out of the back of their house and it's all just in name. So if you ever want decorations for any event, we have centerpieces, we have flower balls, we have everything. This year, we're actually planning on more or less doubling our inventory to include that we're going to offer like charity casino equipment and stuff like that, as well as entertainers. But yeah, we have all sorts of centerpieces. If you want to have a wedding for heavily discounted price, our goal is to make sure that everyone can have, whether it's a birthday party, bar mitzvah, baby shower, everything you want that's affordable and on a budget. It's at opulencerentals.ca. That's opulencerentals.ca. And yeah, it handles all of our booking. We have all of our inventory there. You can check it out. We have, I think at this moment, we have 150 centerpieces. We have over 300 flowers. We have over a dozen different designs and colors to match whatever your theme is. And if there's ever anything you're looking for and we don't have it, we have an email address on the website. You can contact us. Let us know. If it's 90 days or more away, we're usually very, very good at getting it and sourcing it and making sure that your event is exactly how you want it and you don't break the bank. So again, that website is Opulence, OPULENCE, rentals, RENTALS.ca. And yeah, I really appreciate you to check it out.
All right, guys. So thank you for tuning into the latest episode. I'm pretty sure this is also the longest episode for now, right? But
tune in for part 2.
Yes, there will be a part 2 in the future. If we're both here in the future, you never know. We might get the asteroid, right? But if the asteroid doesn't come, obviously we'll link back up with Alex. Thank you for taking your time, and thank you for having me in your house, right? But we are going to wrap it up because it is getting a little bit late. So either way, guys, make sure you do check out the other episodes. Make sure you do check out that website as well. All the details, the phone numbers will be on whatever platform you're listening to this on so that you guys could get in contact. If you are in the GTA and you need those services, please come through. All right. With that being said, hopefully you guys have a nice day and you enjoy a long podcast. And there will be more guest episodes soon, more solo episodes as well. But there might be a little bit of a hiatus. It's basketball season. I'm a big host, so we'll see. But the goal for this year is to be a little bit more consistent with these things. So hopefully you guys have a nice day, night, whatever, and catch you guys
later.